Hello and welcome to Mastering Excel Functions. In this series, we'll be looking at a few of Excel's more popular functions. I'll provide proper syntax, real-world examples, and occasionally some hot tips and tricks. Today's function is if and its variants. We'll be looking at if and nesting ifs, ifs, if error, if NA. Let's get started. Our worksheet contains an array of fictitious persons and their equally fictitious email addresses. Simply put, the if function lets you test for a condition and react to whether the condition is met or not. The syntax is equals if, your logical test, comma, the value if true, and the value if false. Anything within the open and closed parentheses is called an argument, and any argument within an open and closed square bracket is an optional argument. Let's try some examples. Example 1 tests for the condition that cell B3 contains the text Donna. If it does, then our value if true is set to yes. If cell B3 does not contain the text Donna, then our value if false is set to no. We can see that B3 does indeed contain the text Donna. Before we move further, I'm going to place our second formula example in cell L5. Watch both of our formula cells when I change B3 from Donna to Frank. Terrific! It looks like they're both working. If we just want to test for a condition and just looking for a true or false indicator, remember we don't have to provide value if true and or value if false. The key here though is to ensure that you follow the logical test with a comma. If we test B3 for Donna, Excel returns the value as 0 as a true indicator. However, if we test B3 for Frank, we actually get the word false as our indicator. I don't know why this isn't more consistent, but it is what it is. So what happens if we forget that comma? We get an error message that says there's a problem with our formula, and Excel makes a couple of recommendations for correcting it. To be honest, I have rarely, if ever, created an if formula without providing both the value if true and the value if false. The real power of if is its ability to nest up to 7 if statements in one. I've done it, and believe me, it's not pretty, and a troubleshooting nightmare. To demonstrate a nested if function, I'll first place two formulas in two separate cells to ensure they both work as expected before we try to combine them. In cell G11, I'll type the formula equal if, open parentheses, B3 equals quotation Donna, end quotation, comma, quotation B3 dash Donna, end quotation, comma, quotation false, quotation end parentheses. As we move forward, I'm going to assume you understand that all functions must include opening and closing parentheses, and that any textual data in the logical test or return values must be enclosed in quotations. Okay, in cell G12, I'll type equals if C3 equals Slater, comma neither. We can see that both formula are working as expected. Now I'm going to type an apostrophe at the very beginning of each formula. The following technique can be very useful when you're trying to embed or nest a function within another function. Okay, let's think about the logic. What I want to happen is for Excel to test B3 to see if the word Donna is there. And if it is, I want Excel to stop then and there and just return the message B3-Donna. One thing to think about when you're nesting multiple conditions is that Excel stops at the very first test that evaluates to true. If B3 is not Donna, I want Excel to determine if the last name or the value in C3 is Slater. So, if B3 is Donna, I want the message B3-Donna. If B3 is not Donna, I want to check and see if C3 is Slater. If the word Slater is in cell C3, then return the word Slater. But if the word Slater is not in cell C3, then return the word neither, indicating that neither test condition was met. Make sense? Okay. I'll grab the formula in cell G11 by selecting everything in the formula bar except the apostrophe. I'll use the keyboard combination Control or Command C to copy the formula to my clipboard. Hit Escape. Now place my cursor in cell G13. Use the keyboard combination Control or Command V to paste my formula. Using the same technique, I'll grab the second formula, cell G12, but this time I'll select everything except the apostrophe and the equal sign. Then I'll copy it to the clipboard. Using Control or Command C, now hit Escape. Place my cursor in cell G13, and this time I'm going to select the word false, including the quotation marks. Now, using Control or Command V, paste the second formula where our first value if false argument should be. Ta-da! We have our nested function. All right, I've shown you an example of how to nest the if function within another if function. The next example we'll be looking at is the function ifs, or ifs, which is now included in Excel version 2016. It's a far cleaner approach to nesting test conditions and raises the limit from 7 to 127. Yowzer. Ifs, or the plural of if, has a syntax that works with pairs. That is, every logical test must be associated with value if true statement, and there must be at least one pair of logical test and value if true. In the first example, we look at multiple tests on the same cell, Q11. I have a formula that checks this cell and based on the number it finds, will return the applicable day of the week. Because there are 7 conditions to test, the formula is quite lengthy, so I'm just going to copy and paste the one that I already have in cell O17. Now we can test our formula by changing the value in Q11. We could take this a step further by placing a validation rule on this cell, so that only the numbers 1 through 7 will work, but that's a lesson for another day. Okay, that's testing one cell with multiple conditions. Our second and third examples demonstrate what happens when your test is over more than one cell. Exactly like the if function, ifs stops at the first occurrence of a true or positive result. In our second example, Excel finds Donna and returns the first value if true, B-yes. Our third example does not find Frank in cell B3 and so moves on and tests cell C3 for the text Slater. This evaluates to true, and so Excel presents the value if true, or C3-yes. In our final example, we see what happens if neither test evaluates to true. B3 does not have Frank, and C3 does not have Watson, so Excel returns the value not available error. Coincidentally, our next if function tests for errors. The if error function has a syntax of equals if error, open parentheses, value, comma, value if error, close parentheses. Note, both value and value if error are required. This function tests the cell for the following errors. The reference error is when a formula refers to a cell that is no longer valid. the div by zero error, or the division by zero error, and the null error. This error indicates an incorrect range operator. Check for missing colons or misplaced commas. We see in our first two examples that Excel has found one of these error types and returns the word problem, just as we've asked it to. Our third example demonstrates what is returned if we omit the value if error argument, even though the targeted cell is in an error state. You see Excel has returned a 0. In our fourth example, we see what happens when we use if error on a cell that is not in an error state. In both text and numeric cells, the cell's contents, or the value, is returned. Our fifth example displays the results when we omit the value if error argument, even though our targeted cell is not in an error state. Again, it returns a 0. So it's clearly important to ensure that we have a value if error argument. Otherwise, we could miss the error entirely. Finally, we're looking at the if NA function. Well, NA may seem like an error that might have been captured by the if error function. The thing we need to remember is that NA is not so much an error as it's a heads up. It's Excel's way of telling you that the value you're seeking is not found, not necessarily an error so much as potentially missing or mistyped data. The NA or not available message is typically thrown by one of the lookup functions, so the if NA function works best when evaluating or validating one of those functions. In this case, we'll look at a VLOOKUP formula that throws the NA result. Cell AG12 contains the VLOOKUP formula VLOOKUP AG11 in range AD through AD151 and return column 2. So we're looking for the word pair in column A, where it obviously does not exist. To prove that the problem is not an error with our VLOOKUP formula, we'll first type the word pair in cell A4. As we can see, our VLOOKUP works now. Let's walk through our examples. There are only two arguments for if NA, and they're both required. The syntax is equal if NA value, comma, value if NA. Our first example looks in cell AG12 and finds NA, therefore returns the text we placed in our formula. The second example looks in cell AG12, finds NA, and returns the value of another cell, AG11. Our third example demonstrates what happens when our value if NA is omitted, but a comma is placed after the value argument. We have to be careful with those commas. Let's see what happens when we omit both the value if NA and the follow-on comma. As expected, Excel throws an error, suggesting our formula is incomplete. Going back to the third example, we can see how one little comma can give totally unexpected results. Okay, probably the best use of this function is in combination with one of the lookup functions. A little bit of built-in validation, if you will. The final example demonstrates this by replacing the value argument of if NA with a complete VLOOKUP formula. Capiche? In summary, Today we looked at several if functions, specifically if, with nested ifs, if-s or ifs plural, if-error, and if-na. I hope you found this helpful and that I've been able to demystify a couple of Excel's more popular functions. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you like this video, please hit the thumbs up, share with your friends, and leave me a comment below. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe and click on the bell icon to be notified when new videos are posted. Don't forget to check out our website where you can find other free stuff like seamless patterns, deco toners, Illustrator brushes, and page borders. That's at www.lillizzy.net. Cheers!